Hi everybody, I am doing a video because I've been conscious that I haven't done a newsletter, blog, whatever I want to call it. I don't even really know what it is. It's just a communication to people that are on my subscriber list to kind of check in, to see how you're going, to share my thoughts and ideas. And if it resonates, that's great. And if it doesn't, that's all good as well. But I've been super busy, and if you've been watching my posts, you're probably seeing my honest revelations that I have been going through a relationship ending, an ending of something that probably I needed to go through, but at the same time has really caused me some discomfort, let's put it that way. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about that to people. And again, so if it doesn't resonate with you, that's all well and good. But if it does, then keep on listening. And if you want to share your experience with me or your thoughts about what I'm going to say, I'm more than happy to hear alternative points of view. But what I do want to say is that whatever I share with you is my truth and my application of the world around me. And that's the beauty of doing this sort of stuff, is that, you know, we all have our own truth, and sometimes that might sound familiar to you and sometimes it might not, and you might have a different take on it. So what I did want to share is that in sort of reflecting back on the relationship that I've exited recently, and also my previous relationships, and having really good discussions and trying to get some insight from them, is that I keep thinking about how we try and understand the world and how that can help us heal, get closure, whatever it is. And one of the things that kind of pops up to me is the desire, I guess, for people to put labels on certain behaviour. And I know for me, with some of my previous partners, I've noticed behaviour that isn't in alignment with my expectations, I guess, or the way I would do things in the world. And it makes me reflect back to my criminological training. So if you don't know, in my 20s, I studied criminal justice, which is essentially criminology. And I've also studied sociology. So I've got an undergraduate and a postgraduate honours degree in criminal justice. And so I know those theories relatively well, not like an academic would, but I certainly have kept them in my little kitty of how to understand society and how to understand human behaviour and how we interpret the world and all the rest of it. And one of the theories that come up for me is the sociological theory of the labelling theory, which is essentially about deviance and about how we interpret the world, and anything that goes outside the norms of what we consider normal behaviour is essentially deviant. And the labelling theory, from memory, sort of suggests that in labelling someone or labelling a behaviour, it can actually make that behaviour come to fruition, particularly with young people. So I'm always conscious of putting labels on myself or on other people and wondering, is it really helpful? Is it really helpful to, for instance, call somebody a narcissist or call somebody a toxic or whatever it is? And the reality is, I guess for me, is that there's definitely certain behaviours that feel narcissistic and feel toxic and all the rest of it, because it goes outside of the norms of the behaviour that I expect. But one thing I've been thinking of is really how helpful is that to get closure? Because I know for myself, sometimes holding that negative energy and that hatred, that good versus evil, if you will, perception of the world, because a relationship has ended and somebody has sometimes done some really shitty stuff. And don't get me wrong, like there are some really shitty behaviours that you can experience in intimate relationships and all sorts of relationships, you know, parents and kids. And I've been there in all respects. So, but what I'm saying is I've had that reflection of how useful is it to label it? And as a hypnotherapist, one of the things that I take clients through, and I've had myself taken through, is that really that acceptance of everybody's trying to operate in a world the best they can. And sometimes the best they can is not very good. And certainly wherever you sit in the world and the way you operate in the world, if somebody's operating quite outside of that norm, then that is essentially deviance. And so we label it. But just going back to how you feel about that, I know for myself, I've struggled with it. I've struggled with labeling that behavior because it just doesn't sit well in me. It doesn't sit well in me. It helps me for a moment separate myself from the person, especially when I'm trying to end a relationship, because for me, it's not healthy. For me, it's not, I don't want to continue that relationship because it's not serving me in that moment in my life. But it also doesn't sit well with the fact that, you know, I don't want to label somebody. I don't want to hate them. I don't want to have that negative emotion in my body for that person. And really, I'm transitioning, I guess, into a state of understanding that some people have come from really traumatic backgrounds and they don't know any better. So having acceptance of that, forgiving them for that, forgiving myself for allowing them to come into my life, because I've got to look at my responsibility in that too. And I know, particularly with men, I have come from a place where I feel sorry for people and I want to rescue them. I feel better about myself when I bring people into my fold and I can rescue them. And really, I know that that's not a helpful dynamic either. So I have to take full responsibility for that. And the fact that it hasn't worked out, there's always learnings in it. There's always silver lining with any adverse event. And I've spoken about this as well on multiple occasions. Even the worst adversity, there's always some learnings, some personal learnings that come from that. So when I look back in terms of my previous relationships and the fact that, yes, I've wanted to label them and apply terms to them that we tend to do, you know, quickly and easily, and, you know, look for evidence then to support that particular label. But really, how does that help us heal? How does that help us find the learnings within ourselves, the silver lining, the whatever it is, so that we can close the door on that particular event, take what we need to, so that we can evolve and move forward and actually bring in what we want to bring in. So for me, I am looking for that big love. I've just finished Dr. Bruce Lipton's audio book called The Honeymoon Effect. And I love the way he talks. He's a biologist. He's, I think, a stem cell biologist. So he comes from a science background, but he talks in a way that's not too out there. So it doesn't freak people out if you're a little bit skeptical of all of the quantum physics, I guess, and the universal laws that some people talk about in quite a different way. So I really like the way he presents his theories on the world and how he applies them to his own life to attract what he wants to attract into his life. And this particular audio book actually talks about a lot of things, but at the end, he has a beautiful recollection of how he had gone through some really bad relationships, and then he ultimately attracted a beautiful woman into his life. And even though that wasn't smooth sailing, he speaks about the learnings in that and what he needed to do and what he needed to change and what he needed to have awareness of in terms of how he was creating his own reality. And the first chapter, I believe, is really about vibration and energy vibration, and just trusting what our body is saying to us. And so shifting out of that labeling space where people are coming into our lives and it doesn't feel good. And eventually, you know, when we stop trying to analyze it, when we stop trying to label it, when we stop trying to understand it, and we just check in, we just check into our heart space. Does it feel good to be around that person? Does it feel good when they say certain things to you? Does it make you feel content and happy and calm? Now, I'm not saying that every relationship should make you feel that way all the time, because that's not realistic either. And sometimes we've got to have those difficult moments, as I said, to really look inside. But if you're in a scenario where it really just isn't feeling great, more so than not, then I think we've just got to be in a place of trust that that dynamic isn't good for us. And it's okay to say goodbye to that person. And it might be that it's a trigger for you and you need to do some work. And that's okay as well. And if they're at you because you're wanting to end that relationship for your own sanity, for your own peace of mind, for your own nervous system's functioning, that's not in fight or flight or freeze, then that gives you more evidence that that energy is just not something that you want to be around. So the purpose of my talk today is really articulating my thoughts around how I've called in, how I've attracted in some interesting relationships with men, and how I'm aware of what's inside of me. And also just noticing the fact that when I label those particular men or those particular behaviours and try and lump them into a class that is essentially deviant using the labeling theory, it's not helpful for me because it doesn't feel good. And it's probably not helpful for them, especially if I say that to them, because, you know, then if they are vulnerable or susceptible to taking on board that label that I've applied to them, it might be that they just start acting that way. Or it might be that they really believe that that is the case, that they are narcissistic, that they are toxic. And then they might do something and they go, oh, well, there you go, Mia was right, or such and such was right, I am toxic, I'm narcissistic. And that doesn't really help anybody. We've all got bad behaviours. We've all got times where we haven't acted in our best state. And that's okay too. You know, the other thing I'm doing some work on is the shadow side. I'm reading another book called The Dark Side of the Light Chasers. And I got this book years ago, like over a decade ago, and it sat in my bookshelf and I'm like, I need to read that, I need to read that, I need to read that. And I've just picked it up. So I kind of listen to audiobooks, I read books, I do a whole lot of things, and then I integrate them into my knowing and my perception of the world. And as I started this talk, I said, this is just my truth. This is just how I perceive the world. And I'm sharing it with you in case it resonates with you. If it doesn't, then that's all good. Or if you want to add to it, if you want to discuss it, then feel free to come forward and tell me your take on it. But yeah, so to summarize, I guess, is that energy is the critical thing. We really need to learn to trust our bodies, to trust how we feel around people, and just to be okay with going, you know what, I don't want to be around that. And that's okay. And I choose to be around this. And any growth you take along that journey because you've been triggered, that's your own stuff. And similarly, whoever's around you, that's their own stuff. And if they don't get where they're at, then it's not your job to make them get it. This is a big learning for me, by the way. So I'm going to leave you with that. And I'm going to hope that wherever you are in your world, you are safe and calm and at peace most of the time, or that you're experiencing some growth out of any challenges or adverse events. If you need help, please reach out. There's many places that can help you navigate this journey, this wonderful journey of life. And as always, I will always say to people, think about hypnotherapy. If you haven't thought about hypnotherapy, it really is a profound mode of therapeutic intervention to really help you heal what needs to be healed so that you can live your best life. So I'm going to leave you with that, and I'm going to say goodbye. And I'm not going to write too much in my newsletter, blog, whatever it is. And I'm just hoping that you'll watch this. If you have watched this, it would be awesome if you can let me know that you have. And as I said, give me any feedback. So have a great day, have a great weekend, and I'll catch you soon. Mā te wā.